Today I have a video which I've been waiting a long time to make, the complete base building guide for the meta at Town Hall 17, especially for how to defend against Root Riders and Dragons. But before we get into that, first I want to show you a cool trick with the Ice Block spell. So this trick that I'm about to show you is going to be with the Royal Champion charge, letting her get pulled by the hook tower and then using an Ice Block spell, as you're going to see, to make her not take any damage, and then she's going to get the core completely. And to do this trick, it's important to use the Phoenix on the Royal Champion rather than the Fox, because the Fox could go ahead and get pulled by the hook tower instead. So I'm going to show you how to do this right now. And now just watch and learn. So this is the range of the hook tower. If we place the RC at this wizard tower, actually, the hook tower might not pull her because it's not really super exact, or the RC also has her own spear range. So it's better to be safe. We're going to get the RC towards here, and let's get started. Tank with an ice golem just so she can get a bit more tanking. Ice block spell. Hook tower is going to pull her. Invis. Earthquake. Okay, maybe that wasn't even that well executed, but she still gets a huge part of the core, and oh yeah, she even has the Phoenix to bring her back to life and get a few more defenses. So I mean, look at this value. The base is completely destroyed from the center. So make sure to use the Phoenix next time you want to do this trick. But now back to the video. Now for this video, we're going to be having two bases. One is going to be a box base, the other is going to be a diamond base. And I'm going to be taking you first of all through the process of how I built these bases and things to look out for when building box or diamond bases. And then after looking at this general layout of the base, I'll tell you how to lay out the outside defenses and the trash buildings for these kinds of bases. And at the end, we're also going to be looking at the trap placements for each style of base and what you can do in the current meta. Now for this box kind of base, there are a few things to note. Now, as always, if you've watched my previous base building videos, you would know that the first thing you do when building a base is to lay out the general layout of the defenses. So you kind of want to have a general spread of the defenses. The compartments are made with like a 5-tile gap. So 1, 2, or I'll do it with walls. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so the archer queen can't reach inside of them. For example, even from here, she can't reach into this. From here, she can't reach into the scatter. I could have even made the scatter like this, and the queen still wouldn't be able to reach. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like that. So that's the general idea of how you want to start. But okay, of course you know how to build compartments that aren't reachable for the archer queen and all that kind of stuff. But how do you decide how to lay out the defenses? Well, these days you really have to think about Root Rider pathing. So for example, you might want to have a strong core that's not easy to path into. So as you can see, there are all these, all these defenses along the outside, but then this core is a bit isolated on all sides. And this is super important, so you can have damage that Root Riders can't easily path into. So now, specifically looking at this box kind of base, what are some things to look out for? Well, first of all, notice this town hall compartment where the town hall is isolated and there aren't defenses like here in this kind of area. And especially ever since, I believe, April, right before the first monthly finals for the World Championship, People started to really make all these isolated town hall compartments because they figured out that since the town hall doesn't have a gigabomb and explode when it's destroyed, it's better to take advantage of its long range and high damage. So basically every base you see these days has this isolated town hall where there aren't really defenses around it. Now some of you might ask, how do I know how to place these scatter shots and expos and monoliths and all these defenses? Well, basically, as you're laying out the base, you kind of try to think about how the attacker is going to approach the base, approach the different defenses, and place them in ways where they're a bit challenging to the attackers and try to provide a bit of resistance against the attacks that they may be doing. Now note that this can actually take some time. Of course, as you're laying out the base, you'll be adjusting certain compartments, the walls, you might change them up a little bit here and there to make sure that you can fit all the defenses you would like in the areas you want. And this can take a bit of time, of course. I mean, just for laying out the general defenses, it might take me half an hour, maybe even a bit more, and then filling in the rest. It could also take another half an hour, maybe between an hour to an hour and a half on a base. So just be patient, think through it slowly, and you'll figure out the right combinations. And of course, one more tip, if you guys are a bit more beginners into base building, there will be times when you build bases and you're like, I just can't really figure out how to make this work. This isn't really good. And it's totally okay to scrap the base in that case and just start over because you know you're learning. And even for me, sometimes I might just scrap bases and say, this doesn't really work. And just one more tip, which I recently learned actually just this last week, is when you start building bases, maybe don't always start with building from the town hall compartment, which I always used to do, but you can totally start building bases from other compartments. Like if you want a certain kind of core or a certain kind of backend, you can build that first and build the base around it, just to get a few different ideas in. Now let's take a look at the possible entries on this base to see how we can place the rest of the outside defenses and maybe even the traps later on. But first of all, you should know that I actually built this base way back in April, even before the ladder stage started for the World Championship qualifiers, but this base has defended amazingly both in the Clan War League and in esports, of course. It's a really good base, it showcases a lot of amazing principles, and it's still usable to this day in this current meta. It still defends against the current strategies. But now let's look at what we can do on it. So first of all, back when this base was built, people were playing kind of simple entries. So like Royal Champion charge into here, Root Riders through this area, and a funnel all around here. But this is where you can see this isolated town hall idea shines, because Root Riders can't really path into the town hall because there's a defensive ring. And even if they went into the town hall, they're still going to split off onto the flanks. And of course, that's why those fire spitters do really well in the core. And that's why I worked very hard to make sure that they are unreachable from the outside so they can continue to deal damage. Now also this multi-inferno here adds some nice splash damage to the area, and the monolith also provides a really nice backhand. Now what's another entry you can do on this base? Now this second Root Rider entry is actually a bit more recent with the log launcher dive, and we did not really know this back when I built this base, but still we're going to be considering everything right now as if this base was like for this current time, because we're even going to see how we could like improve these bases, improve the traps, the outside defenses and everything. So people could go in with like a Royal Champion charge from over here to take out this expo, and then they would like to get a log launcher through here to destroy the core, but that's kind of difficult because there's like 2 heroes and some nice damage around this area, even the expos. But if you send in the king and queen to this area, king with his ability, queen to support, they'll kind of clear out this compartment, then the log launcher will be able to go through the core of the base. And this is actually, when I was just doing some hard mode practice for fun, I tested this entry on this base and it got like a 99% time fail. So it's a totally legit entry. And this was on the first try on the base. But then, of course, you send the Root Riders in through here after this core is kind of destroyed. And then they can kind of continue to go through the base and get towards the back side of the base. But of course, as always, there are things you can do to stop this entry and make it more difficult. But how about some other strategies, like the fireball into rocket balloons? Because actually, I originally built this base for the Clan War League, and this was one thing I really considered. And of course, people would want to go with like a Warden Charge from here, get a fireball like into this core somehow, or even those fire spitters. And that's why, of course, I have like the Queen on this side, the Minion Prince on this side, or like the Royal Champion and the King. So wherever you expect a Warden Charge to come in, you can always have heroes on two sides to make sure that whichever side he goes to, he's going to be facing a bit of trouble. And of course, in hard mode, this is like practically impossible, and people just aren't going to do rocket balloon hits. And of course, how about if they come in from this side? Well, if they come in with a Warden Charge from this side, well, the Town Hall in of itself is already a defense against the Warden Charge, but the Clan Castle is also a bit close, so the Warden is going to lure that out, and that's also going to be rather impossible. Now, with Spirit Walk into Dragon attacks, they can't really work on this base unless the Royal Champion Charge gets into this core, which is why we have to, when we place the outside defenses, work very hard to make this core super isolated. Now, another thing about making an isolated core is also Royal Champion Charges with the Root Riders. So for example, if a Royal Champion Charge was able to come in here with the Royal Champion Charge was able to come in from here, get this Monolith, and then we can just play the Root Riders over here with the King and Queen funneling along the outside. This base is going to be wrecked, which is why we can't allow this Monolith to be taken out. And this is actually an important lesson with box bases, especially one which I kind of learned more recently, which is, imagine we had kind of a Rage Tower core in this area. So I'm just going to make it hypothetical. I'll just take this Inferno. Maybe we had this. If we had like a big Rage Tower core just like this, it would be very important that the Royal Champion Charge can't come into here, take out half the core, and then send in the Root Riders through here with a funnel around here. This was actually how some of the old bases during the World Championship warm-ups got destroyed by the Root Riders, especially those double rage bases. Actually, I think it was during even the first April monthly finals. I think like Synchronic kind of made this mistake and they didn't really know about this entry, and it was actually Team Electros who totally took advantage of it. Royal Champion Charge to take out kind of the core, and then the Root Riders through here. So of course, whenever you make a core in a box base, just always actually, just please make sure that the Root Riders cannot path into it, and that it's going to still provide some heavy damage. Because there's no use having like one Inferno, or like an Inferno and like a multi-gear tower that troops can't path into, because they're not going to provide much damage. So you need to kind of balance out stacking the damage all in one place to actually punish mistakes and bad funneling, but at the same time make sure that it's not easy to funnel troops into that area. Or actually in this case it should really be impossible, because that would be game over for the base. Alright, and one more thing, Flame Flinger value. You don't have to pay too much attention to it these days because Flame Flingers are not really part of the meta, but especially if you're building for hard mode, try to pay attention to it a little bit, but it's not too hard overall because you have Expos, the Monolith, the Town Hall, King, Queen, Royal Champion, Minion Prince, even Mortars, so many ways, even Fire Spitters, so many things that outrange the Flame Flinger these days. So it shouldn't really be too big of a worry to defend, and just pay attention to it like towards the end of the base building process. So how did I place the rest of the outside defenses? Well, I basically placed them in a ring all around the base to make sure the Royal Champion literally can't get inside the base. And that's what I thought back in April, just to not let the Royal Champion get inside the base at all. But now what we know is that you actually can get a royal champion into the base pretty much anywhere, as long as you have enough invisibility spells to redirect her. So it's more important to be super focused on where you want to defend the royal champion, and you can make it more difficult in some places and easier in other places. So for example, one good entry these days that's rather popular would be like a royal champion charge into here, people sending the root riders into here, with an overgrowth on the town hall and fire spitter. Of course, you guys probably saw the double overgrowth approach if you're watching esports these days. The root riders continue to pass through here. Once they're on this area, the town hall will wake up. The king is going to be funneling along here, and then the root riders will take out the town hall and then continue around here. You can overgrowth like part of the core, since this core is a bit skinny. Maybe you can just overgrowth the whole thing actually and just let the root riders move through the rest of the base. I never tested this entry on this base. I did not know this way back then. But this is something that people would do more these days. So what could we have done, for example, against this? Actually, I'll show you one more entry before we can look at what we could have done differently. Of course, you remember the log launcher approach. So for example, sending in the royal champion charge into here, which is still possible, king and queen into here, log launcher through here, and the root riders through here. So now, having these entries in mind, what could I have done? Well, first of all, I think what I would do these days is maybe make this compartment, maybe put in some defenses into this compartment. I would be fine with that. And also just notice how the air defenses here are covered by the wizard towers. That's just important, so rocket balloons can't just snipe them out easily in dragon attacks. But what I would have done these days was, first of all, maybe put in some Teslas around here to make sure that a royal champion charge really can't get into here, because actually Teslas are a pretty good way of stopping a royal champion charge, because if an opponent places a royal champion charge and finds a whole Tesla farm, they totally would not have expected that. They definitely don't have enough invisibilities, and they won't get this scatter shot at all. And then, since this entry into the scatter shot would have been impossible, people with a double overgrowth root riders might have went like, okay, we'll royal champion charge this area, we'll send the root riders through here, overgrowth over here, and then they'll wake up over here, they'll get the town hall, continue to move through the base. So they just go with a safer royal champion charge, less invisibilities, they'll just get the expo and not the scatter shot. And that's why perhaps then I could choose to, for example, bait the royal champion charge into here, a compartment of this kind of size, and then have the chance to place giant bombs to bait the royal champion charge into this area. And now an interesting thing to note about these giant bomb traps is these days, especially in hard mode and normal mode, it's important to bait both sides of the base relatively equally, because people might come in with a royal champion charge from the left side, from the right side, so it's important to kind of stop both. Like, especially in hard mode, you can't just hope they're going to go into a bait. You kind of have to defend them at all costs because the meta is a bit difficult. And of course, around this area, maybe I would have placed like some Teslas. Now, how about the other entry with the log launcher? We know people will come in with a royal champion charge into here, and maybe these outside defenses are fine, they make it reasonably difficult. But now what more could I have done? Well, since we're already baiting this side with giant bombs, we really can't do anything about this side. But we can bait the log launcher follow-up. So for example, we might put, maybe we could have like 2 Teslas in this area, or actually, okay, forget the Teslas here, but say we place a Tesla farm here to bait the log launcher kill squad, and then all sorts of skeleton traps, for example. So as you can see, we don't have to bait the Royal Champion Charge. We can also bait the follow-up, especially with log launcher entries. It's very easy to bait them with like skeleton traps, Teslas, even giant bombs are great. Another thing for these days would be to make sure that maybe this ricochet cannon is a bit like off-center, so a giant arrow can't come through and destroy these things, kind of, with like an earthquake. Of course, these are kind of more advanced stuff, but you can, of course, always pause the video, look back if you want to understand something a little bit more. Okay, so that's basically the general idea of what I would have done these days. So I would have, for example, baited this Spirit Walk with giant bombs. This one, I would have allowed it, but I would have baited the follow-up with like the log launcher. And another thing actually, which I don't really like, is the sweeper placement here. Because although it's good against dragons, if like root riders were coming in from like this expo, they can easily pass into the scatter shot. So maybe these days I would have done something like, had like an air defense here or something, so they can pass here, here, and here, to go a little bit more around the outside and give the scatter shot more time to fire. This scatter shot could have actually been moved over here, and the queen still won't be able to reach it from here. So these kind of things would be kind of important as well. And then maybe to make a Spirit Walk into this section harder, I would like place, I don't know, like say an extra wizard tower or a mortar. So that's basically the general summary now, before we move on to the traps I did for this base. Or actually, I do have one more thing first. But again, because it's super important, you can bait the Spirit Walk on one side, another side you don't have to bait it. You can bait the log launcher, and you can even kind of stop the root rider follow-up by making sure that root riders can't path easily. Maybe I'd put a storage into this scatter shot, so they would go around the outside like here. And this, if people wanted to go with Royal Champion Charge from here, there would just be too many defenses to kind of allow that. Now, one final thing before we move on to the traps, which is not super important but has a bit of strategy to it, is the storage placements. And first of all, you can notice these storages in the core. They kind of are there. For example, imagine dragons came into this area. They would provide a little bit of HP while the town hall starts to shoot at them a little bit. Maybe here, of course, storages just generally to protect high HP and high value defenses. Now, another thing over here is actually say these collectors. Sometimes you can use collectors and place spring traps on them. Actually, with these open walls, like Valkyries would come in from here, you could place like spring traps to spring them. But sometimes people place collectors or storages out of the way of root riders, so the Valkyries kind of split off to them. So in this case, for example, maybe when we talked how the root riders would go through here and continue through the base, there's a good chance that this wall would kind of be opened up, and then the Valkyries would also split off and start targeting this elixir storage, which would be not great for the attacker. And you can, of course, always place spring traps here to kind of spring them away. Now, one more thing around the town hall area. Of course, we place these walls rather than placing storages. For example, I wouldn't really want a storage here, because if the root riders came in through here or something, maybe the Valkyries would split off onto the storages and be in a position to take out the town hall, which would be kind of annoying. Same with this core. I don't really want Valkyries to go into this area, although it might not be bad if like this area is under overgrowth and the Valkyries go on here and they kind of get distracted. But yeah, that's kind of a trade-off you have to think of between whether do I want to place storages or just a dead space with walls. And one final thing before trap placements is sweeper placement. This is basically totally dependent on where you expect dragon hits to come in from. So if you see a Royal Champion Charge that's going to lead up to a dragon follow-up, just place the sweepers to defend the dragons. Sweepers can also be good against like healers with root riders, like even placing like the healers and the coconut balloons, pushing them back to be in a line so the red air bombs take them out at one point, or just to kind of delay them a little bit. Those are just some general pointers with the air sweepers. Now we already did a lot discussing the traps on this base, so we won't go too much into it, but you'll see kind of the ideas that I went for in the past. So I tried to bait this Royal Champion charge into here. I don't know if this bait, I think it worked pretty okayishly. I don't know if it was perfect. Maybe I could have added more giant bombs. Of course, I was trying to be a bit conservative back then with the giant bombs, but now you kind of need to place a few more of them because you really want to make sure the RC goes down. Now, another thing actually with outside defenses is that bomb towers and mortars are actually kind of decent defenses against the Spirit Walk. It's not something you really need to think about, but it's just a pro tip that, okay, of course the bomb towers will have the explosion damage, which will damage the Spirit Fox, but also mortars shoot pretty quickly, just like the Town Hall, so they'll add a little bit of damage against the Spirit Fox. I actually just found that out yesterday when I was doing some base testing, and it was kind of interesting to find out. Just like the Crusher Mortar would also shoot quickly against the Spirit Walks these days, so people would play that defense in a place to kind of stop the Spirit Walks. But of course, as you can see now, since I kind of expected people to go in with the RC charge from here, Root Riders from here, I placed this Black Mine just to help take down Coco Loons or something. Air defenses are always good also on the area where Root Riders come in from, just to take out Coco Loons. These Teslas were kind of there to stop the funnel a little bit with skeleton traps. There might only be one or two, I don't know. And then the red bombs, of course, just to take out the healers. Now these days with the Sneezy and the Queen, the Sneezy, it's mainly used on the Queen actually, or the Warden. But anyways, the Sneezy pet kind of makes red bomb placement a little bit annoying because it can trigger red air bombs. But you can always test things out, see maybe if the Queen's funneling along the outside, the Sneezy won't get too deep into the core area over here. So you can kind of test that out. Now one more thing with the Sneezy, of course, is that when people usually place it on the Queen. So if people play like a log launcher entry with the Root Riders, for example, RC charge from here, King, Queen, and log launcher through here, and Root Riders through here, you could place some red bombs in this area to take out the healers because the Sneezy won't be over there. People usually would prefer to play the Diggy on the Warden since his stun is pretty clutch sometimes. But I think anyways it's better to try and bait this double overgrowth approach. Of course, these traps were made before I knew about these entries kind of, but the space again is pretty good and kind of timeless, as you could say. Now just generally other traps, spring traps more around the outside against Valkyries. These days people would also do them on like outside defenses, so if this mortar was here, you might place a spring trap here so a super barbarian can't funnel it. Black Mine's a little bit in the core against like dragons or something. Skeleton traps, okay, here. And also, actually, this was not totally against the hero dive, this was against a rocket balloon hit. People used to go like Warden charged, fireball, Warden here, and then heroes here with like a rocket balloon attack. And this Tesla form was more meant for that, with the Teslas and skeleton traps. But it would also do good against the log launcher approach. So notice again, the traps are usable against multiple entries, and that's what makes these traps really good. One more thing, the tornado trap. Now these days, people actually play the tornado trap with like the giant bombs somewhere to help bait the RC walk. For example, you might have the Giga Bomb in one area with like giant bombs to bait the RC charge. On the other side, you might have like some giant bombs, but also you could add a tornado trap. You can even use the tornado trap to like spin the Royal Champion away from a certain area that's a bit more advanced. to defend the Royal Champion charge, but it's possible in some areas, especially against the long RC walks with the dragons. And here it actually did pretty good, because a lot of people went with like dragon spams, especially in the Clan War League, through this area with like a blimp and a Yeti blimp with clones into the core, and this tornado trap. I think this is like one of the older trap versions. I think after I saw that entry, I placed the tornado trap over here to kind of really stop that entry. But again, the tornado trap can also be used to stop those kind of blimp entries. These days with the Eternal Tome nerf, you can't really have a blimp under Tome, but that's basically it for the trapping ideas. Now, of course, there were a lot of different ideas here. I basically gave you all the different information about how to place the different defenses and traps. So you can always go back and try to understand these things a little bit more. It might take some time, of course, if you're starting out to build. You will definitely need quite a bit of practice, but eventually you will understand these things. Just start out with focusing on more general, simple ideas, and then you can apply some of the more complex things I added in this video. Now, we just finished with the box base masterclass, and now it's time for a diamond one. And this diamond base, I actually built it back in May for esports. And while the box base did amazingly and defended an insane amount, this diamond base didn't do perhaps as well as I'd hoped. While it was still decent, there were still some things with it which could have been fixed. And to understand some of those problems, we should take a look at the possible entries on this base to see what the problems were and perhaps what we could have done about them. So one super common entry on these diamond bases is to get a Royal Champion charge from around here, and then get a queen with a giant arrow and log launcher to shoot through here, especially as there was a trash building like here. This totally helped the giant arrow aim. And then we can have like a king sent into this compartment, and the root riders go through along the rest of the base. Now, another entry could have been like sending a Royal Champion charge through here, taking this out, or even actually going into this area, taking this area out, overgrowth on the Monolith, Town Hall, and Fire Spitter, while sending the root riders through, even if they go through here. And then eventually when they're around here, the overgrowth will wake up, they'll go in towards the core, there's going to be a king funneling them along the outside. And this entry is also super strong, especially with the Rage Gem and Healing Tome, as we know. This really makes Root Rider attacks a lot stronger and more difficult to stop. Now, one more entry, the Spirit Walk into Dragons. This, you don't have to focus on it too much while building a base, especially if it's not going to be super compact with Rage Towers. Just as you test the base, you might see if there happens to be a Spirit Walk into Dragon entry, and you can just react with the sweepers as needed to stop where you think the dragons will come in from. But now, for those Root Rider entries, what could we have done to make them a little bit more difficult? Well, first of all, we could have made the Royal Champion charge into this area a little bit more challenging, so maybe placing some more outside defenses along this area, like in this way. And then maybe this multi-archer tower wouldn't be super great. Again, the base would have to be reorganized a little bit to make this more difficult. And then when I place trash buildings, for example, I shouldn't allow a giant arrow to go through the core. Another thing I could do was, for example, from the building side, was even just to make these defenses going through this area, kind of. Maybe this multi could be a little bit more back or something like that. And ricochet cannons and even multi-archer towers are pretty good at stopping a log launcher dive, because they're going to attack multiple targets, which means they could hit the log launcher and help it die a little bit earlier. What more could I have done? I think that would have been pretty decent defense against this. Would have made it a little bit more challenging, even making, of course, the Root Rider pathing into, say, this section more difficult. That would be important. How about the other entry with the double overgrowth? Well, of course, I should make sure to make this area difficult to get an RC charge into the scatter shot. I could even bait it with giant bombs as needed. And then on this area, of course, the Root Riders will continue their path. Of course, you can always have traps like spring traps against Valkyries and stuff. And one other thing is with the Fire Spitters. Now, if someone decides to go with Root Riders through the Town Hall in that entry, these Fire Spitters would be kind of useless. Which is why actually quite a few diamond bases these days go with Fire Spitters more towards this side of the base, and they're pointed a little bit towards the core. So see, if Root Riders ended up coming through here, Fire Spitters would both end up kind of hitting them and being more annoying. Now, these are quite a few changes on this base, like I would need to make maybe space for this expo somehow. And to kind of make space for this, maybe I would have to remove this multi in the core, make the base a little bit more squished down the long vertical side. So of course, several things which could have been done over there to help defend those entries. But now let's see how I placed the rest of the outside defenses, and we'll see what more we can figure out. Now this is how I place the rest of the outside defenses on this base. Of course, as you can see around here, lots of defenses to stop Spirit Walks from coming into this area. Also good amount of room for giant bombs to bait these kind of Spirit Walks. So I think this kind of entry was reasonably well defended in this base. But on this kind of area, I didn't have too many buildings, too much space. So as you can see, a Royal Champion can very easily get a charge in down here. And then she can get a nice giant, the Queen can get a nice giant arrow through this section. So one thing at first which I should have done was, of course, to do like, let's just take some buildings for fun, do something like this to prevent the giant arrow. But against this, again, if I was going to make like, just hypothetically, okay, air defense wouldn't be on the outside really, but if I wanted to do this and do it in a better way, I might need to move these expos a bit further in, which again, maybe this multi-compartment is not super good, because while it might be difficult to path into this multi again, it's not providing a huge amount of damage. And again, if something's hard to pass thin to, it's only a problem if it's going to punish you with a lot of damage. If not, maybe it's not the greatest. And again, as I said, I might want to place Fire Spitters more towards this area to kind of defend the Root Rider approach from here, which is generally the stronger entry because the log launcher entry is a little bit easier to bait. And now we can look at the traps on this diamond base. And of course, you might notice that we're moving through this one a little bit more quickly than the box base, but that's because I gave you all of the main ideas while talking about the box base, and by this point, you should be more familiar with them, so we don't really need to go into everything all over again. As you can see, I was still aware of this log launcher entry, but I still could have done a little bit better even to trap against it. So here there weren't really traps in this area, but I did kind of try to place a skeleton trap and maybe a giant bomb against the log launcher. Or maybe it was even for Spirit Walk too, like Spirit Walk into dragons coming in through here, which was a pretty decent bait. Skeleton trap for like the king dive into this area. And then this red bomb farm was pretty important because if the healers did not hit the red bomb farm, the attack would kind of triple with the Root Riders going through here. But there was really no way to kind of stop it from hitting the healers unless you go from the other side of the base, which again, if you say, okay, the base got tripled because someone came in from the side that was not baited, in hard mode, this shouldn't really be an excuse. The base should still be strong enough to kind of withstand those attacks. So while I did do a decent job with the traps, I could have done a bit better. Also with the Teslas, I placed them here as being for more of a backhand, but I think if I place the Teslas over towards this area with more skeleton traps and prevented a giant arrow, then maybe this log launcher entry would not have been such a huge deal. Again, I think I still, okay, the minion prince deals decent damage, but maybe I would have needed some more expo coverage, or even if it's not expo coverage, just 2 merge defenses kind of on the flanks of the multi is usually a good idea if you want to defend log launcher entries. So kind of in this way that would have been a little bit better. So that's one thing I could have done. And even as we were talking earlier about this idea with the fire spitters being over here, or it could have been like the fire spitters here, scattershot here. The base would need to be reorganized a little bit, of course, but you can see the general ideas of how maybe another way to build a diamond base, having the fire spitters more towards the back end, to not only cover for like the entries going through here. Okay, I guess it doesn't do anything against the log launcher entry in this case, but if we were to bait the log launcher well and not allow it to get good value, then that would be good enough, and not having fire spitters against it would still be okay. And then we can focus more on baiting the super strong entry with Spirit Walk into here, Root Riders through here, that whole double overgrowth stuff. Now, a few more final ideas on this base. These air sweepers, I don't know if they were in the greatest place, since a Spirit Walk into Dragon attack would likely come with like a Spirit Walk from here, and it could take out this decent chunk of the core, and then the dragons could go kind of behind the fire spitters. I think there are ways to make this attack triple, so again, the air sweepers, if I'd paid more attention to that, could have been like more and higher up in the base, away from where Royal Champion Charge might have come. So that's for the air sweepers. One more final point about Teslas, because they are super important. Is that, of course, to remind you, there are several ways to use Teslas in base building. You can use them to bait a log launcher dive. Teslas and skeleton traps are great. You can even use them to stop a Royal Champion Charge. For example, if you like, take these Teslas and have them like around, say here or here, depending on where you think the RC charge is more likely. Even if they're kind of in this area, they would really stop a Royal Champion Charge coming in from here, because you would just need way too many invisibility spells. And actually, if they were here, that would also be good for the log launcher entry, because of course RC here, Queen here, King here, and the Root Riders would move through here, and it would be a nice back-end Tesla form as well. So again, some different ideas for using the Teslas. You can even use the Teslas against a funnel. For example, say a King was funneling this area, you could use them with a ricochet cannon and a skeleton trap too to help out with that. Now, before we end this video, one final point about base testing, because after, of course, you build the base and you place the traps and all that, I would recommend actually to do the building on one day, and then just another day you can place the traps a bit more relaxed, so you can just think clearly about all the different entries, all the possibilities on the base. And then maybe on the day you place the traps, or even another day, you can do some base testing on it. Now, base testing is actually a really good way to also kind of get better at the game, because you need to be familiar with all of the general strategies and approaches. So when you test bases on your own, you should start with trying to test all of the possible entries that you think people will do on the base. So try to test the Spirit Walks, see if the giant bomb baits work as intended, see if maybe the Teslas mess up in the RC pathing a little bit, all of those things. And then you can, of course, refine the traps a little bit on your own as you do the base testing. For example, see where maybe the red air bomb form should be placed, how to really optimize it so Coco-Loons can't trigger it, or even the Sneezy. Maybe test the spring traps a little bit to see if they work against Valkyries. And then, of course, after you do your own testing, that's at least what I do, I let other people test my bases to see if the entries that I tested and refined the traps that I put, whether they still work against other people, or if I need to make some smaller adjustments or even bigger adjustments depending on the base. Also, one more thing with red air bomb forms, because I really want to cover everything in this video. On one side you might put red air bomb forms, but on the other side, if you want to stop healers, you can also put black mines in that area. So that's also just one more interesting tip. Red air bomb form on one side, black mines on the other side. So no matter where the attacker comes in from, especially on hard mode, there's a relatively balanced bait on both sides. Right, and one final point before I end this video: clan castle troops. The clan castle I like to run against root riders is 2 ice golems, 2 rocket balloons, and 9 archers. The archers are pretty good, so if there's a royal champion charge, it can only lure a few archers and the rocket balloons don't get lured out earlier. If you expect that a base will be hit by root riders and dragons, you can go with 2 ice golems, 1 furnace, and 7 archers, since the furnace does do a decent bit against dragons. Of course, there are also other clan castles that pros use, like 1 ice golem, 1 furnace, 2 rocket balloons, and like I think it's 6 archers or something. That one's a bit more of a creative clan castle. You can try it on some bases if you like, if you think it's going to be hit by root riders and dragons, but overall that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. You learned a lot about base building in the current meta. Hopefully I covered pretty much everything there is to cover in this video. If you have any questions, make sure to ask me in the comments. So thanks for watching this, and bye bye.